The first lie I want to talk about is the lie that you have to do open houses.
It just, I guess, I'm not a huge open house guy, but this is the way I use open houses. I think open houses it's like when I'm trying to sell a client's house, there's three objectives. And I tell this to my clients. I said, there's three objectives for me to host an open house. It's one, to look like I'm doing something. Number one, first and foremost, it's because you think that open houses are effective. So I'll do them if you want me to do them. The second reason why I'll do them is because typically people come in and if this is a $400,000 house, they may be qualified for 200. I'm getting name, address, phone number, and I'll take them and help them buy a house somewhere else. And the third objective is to sell your house. And I literally will tell my clients that.
How does that go over?
It actually goes over well because I'm setting expectations.
Yeah.
So the next thing that I do is I tell them it's a numbers game. If I get 10 people in your house, the statistics say that I should get an offer. So if I put your house on the market and I'm struggling with getting people in your house, I will then host open houses in order to get those numbers up. So I just want to set the expectation that the likelihood that I'm going to sell your house because of an open house is relatively low.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
But I'm going to do it in order to expose the property.
Yep.
Am I wrong in that thought process?
No. I mean, you've set the expectation, right? Is that it's mathematics. At the end of the day, what I think people have to understand is that open houses are neither underrated nor overrated.
Right.
They unfortunately are on both sides of the equation here.
Right.
So they are overrated based on return on time for the agent who has a better mathematical way to generate income for the same amount of time invested. And let me unpack that a little bit because that was confusing. So if the average open house is 2 hours, let's say, right, you're going to have drive time there, drive time back. You've got time to put out signs, time to take down your signs. You have time to set up and time to tear down. So let's say at minimum, you're probably looking at a total invested time from 3 to 5 hours, right, depending on how you choose to structure the grandeur of an open house. You then have to analyze it as what's the best return on your time for 3 to 5 hours every single week from a working career's perspective. Is there something that could be done more effectively than, to your point, the conversion rate of what ends up being about 1%? 1% of consumers buy homes at open houses, which means if my intent is to sell the property, there are a lot of things I could do that are a lot more effective. Like stand outside and twirl the cash for gold sign would probably be a better use of my time for 5 hours than thinking I'll sell a property at that open house.
Right.
Now, if you're in a market where the numbers are different, then the numbers are different. Do your own math. However, if you're a brand new agent and you need to have cadavers to train on,
I agree.
Open houses are a great solution
all day long. And it's like all of them work and none of them work. So like if you're a new agent, you're trying to gather names, you're trying to fill your database. And so it's a cheap, effective way to be able to fill your database without spending any money. Yeah. So in that regard, it's worth it.
Absolutely. On the come up, it absolutely makes sense to do.
For me,
we track everything. 83 open houses 1 year, 4 closings. Okay, so there's a couple different things we look at that goes, well, one, you like the math is not great at that, right? 83 invested weekends for 4 closings. So the breakdown then is do you have a terrible personality and therefore you can't convert on a weekend? That was probably my culprit. And then or 2 is the market for open houses not ideal based on your specific location, because there are some locations like that might get 1 to 5 visitors, and then there are some different metropolitan markets that probably get 50 plus people through an open house. On TV, they get a lot. Yeah. Here in the Midwest, not so much.
That's the thing. Like, so for 3 to 4.5 hours, to me, an open house, I'm trying to capture information. So to have conversations with people. So in 3 to 4 hours a week, do I have more conversations during that open house than I can either making phone calls, knocking on doors at an apartment, buying cups of coffee at a coffee shop. So that's how I look at it. I look at it as, okay, what are the other activities that I can do and that can produce income? Open houses are great. I do them. Like I said, I'm trying to demonstrate to my seller, if the house has been on the market and we're not if I want to get people in the house, I'll do them.
Would you do them right now? This is where the challenge to me lies, is in today's market, does it make any sense to do one?
If you have a troubled listing, like if you have a listing that you just got to get, you want to get 10 people in. I in this market, I don't think you really need it.
I think it's for your first point to show the seller that you're doing something. That's my opinion from a non-realtor perspective.
So what I'll do is I'll list the house, like we'll have a house go live on a Thursday, and then we'll have an open house on a Sunday. And then you say you can't respond to any, we're not responding to any offers until after that. And then you can use it as a point of leverage.
Yeah. So that's the difference that I want to touch on, though, is that from an agent perspective, the thing to keep in mind is you have to look at your time in a couple of different ways. You have to look at it as leisure or leverage. Yeah. Right? Is what will you be levering with your time that you would have invested into an open house that will generate you a greater return on time? Or what leisure-based activity are you doing that is worth the amount of time and the income that you're foregoing that you could have been doing on conducting an open house? And that's where each person has to make that decision based on what their own time is worth from a market-based perspective.
Great.
So we had, why don't you guys take that? You take the question. You take the overrated, underrated.
Because what I was going to say is, like, with open houses, that's one way to like generate leads, which is like definitely fair. Did you, during your 83 open houses, did you guys end up having any leads come from it?
Yeah, that was actually the 4, right? Because we track where it's the initial point of contact is where do they derive from, and so the 4. But
they didn't buy that house at the open house.
Correct.
You got the name and number, and you sold them.
In my career, I've only ever sold one house from an open house.
I've done it twice.
Okay.
So that's the point that I'll try to tell people is like, look, I've been doing this 20 years and I've sold one time it happened and one time it fell apart. So I actually have one net. Yep. So like, I want people to understand that the open houses do work, but the likelihood, if I'm the seller, the likelihood of me selling this house from this activity is really low. But the likelihood of me to sell a house to another house from that activity goes up.
Absolutely. Although now that I say that, we sold a house last week, oddly enough. We had 104 showings in 3 days, and the buyer came through on an open house. Wow. Cash buyer too. So interesting, but mathematically the odds are incredibly low.
So open houses definitely are for a new person, a good way to generate leads.
Do it.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
It's free. It doesn't cost anything.
And you can post about it on social media.
Your time value is low.
Yeah, you're broke.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, look, I'm
so
doing
go.
this.
And you need to learn how to talk to people. Honestly, you need to learn what the market looks like. You need to learn the questions that people ask. It is a cadaver. It is the lab for you as a surgeon to learn how to cut people open and try to figure out what is in here and how do I make sense of this.
Yep.
It is a training ground with live people.
And I think when people talk about open houses, I don't think they ever draw that distinction. I've never had this conversation where you just talk about open houses in general and we all just go into either you don't do them or you do. And I think that that's a great distinction. Like, it really depends on where you are in your career. Like me, I delegate it. Like, hey, if I have a house and I feel like it needs an open house, delegate it off to an agent that is, that does that.